Leila, firstly, thanks for coming. Welcome to my living room.
No.
The podcast studio.
Yeah, the podcast studio. Great.
Whereabouts have you come from today? Where's home?
I've actually come from Melbourne because I've been in Melbourne doing editing stuff yesterday and just stayed there last night. I thought I'd come on here. But I'm from Tattayune and the farm with my husband there, and we're, sheep, cattle, cropping.
And has that always been home for you?
No. I'm from a little town called Walcha near Armidale and Tamworth in the New England. So, I was dragged down here met my husband on his middle year of Marcus. He was working in Walcha
on
a sheep farm and, a merino stud, and I was randomly home for the weekend and, instead of bringing a stud ram home, he brought me home.
Fair enough. And your resume, you've got a few different things that you've done over your career. Miss Australia, so obviously involved in, had to bring that one up. But then more recently, acting and directing, producing, the whole lot?
No, so I didn't direct, but I would love to direct, but trying to do everything would be way too hard, especially your first time.
Mm-hmm.
So, producing, writing and acting was what I did in this one. But, I like to keep busy and versatile and keep growing my brain, and everything's sort of connected. Everything's transferable skills, I guess you could say. You learn something here and you can transfer it across to something else. And I've always been a creative person. I'm eccentric. And I've, been labelled with that, but I'm okay with it now. Because sometimes you're like, oh, really? Am I the eccentric person? I'm like, yeah, I am. I am the batshit crazy person. Yeah, that's me. So I just like to be creative and doing different things. And, so that's, I guess, why I've got such random things on my resume, which you think, how do they line up?
But interesting and all kind of align back into similar parts of nearly entertaining, performing somewhat.
Yeah, and then, and agriculture, I guess. Like, getting into fashion was the first part, but it all came from the Wool Awards, the Australian Wool Fashion Awards, and, Dad having merino sheep, and I thought, I'm going to become a fashion designer and make everything out of wool and make my dad rich. Didn't happen. But, so in my whole fashion career and making clothes, everything I've ever made is made from wool, and still like to make everything from wool. So.
Yeah, wow. Tell me more about that. So I guess the influence of your dad's the first part in there. So tell me more about that growing up on the farm and the relationship with your dad, the wool industry. What are those early memories? Yeah,
so my family didn't get into farming the traditional way. Like, my parents didn't inherit a farm or come from the land. Like, my dad's father was a solicitor. So, but my mum come from a farming background, but because she was a girl and it was a different era, she didn't get the opportunity to take on the farm. When her brother didn't want to do it, they sold up. So, so she, so she's an aged care nurse and just, worked with Dad. But then my dad just always had something. He always wanted to work on the land. So he started off as a station hand, and when he left school and went and worked in Northern Territory and WA, in the good old days, he says, when they used to actually do all the droving on horses and things and camp out for weeks on end.
Yeah.
That sounds so romantic. But then, they sort of started off leasing land and then slowly working their way up and buying a bit and slowly building over that. But they always were in fine wool in Walcha. So, and when you're leasing land, you don't have employees. So that's apparently why my dad had children, for free labour. So, so that's how we got into it. So doing the sheep, and had a few cows and things, but we were mainly the wool and fine wool. And
so the dream of making him rich, like how did you actually go about this? I guess how did you go from taking that dream and ambition and trying to turn it into a reality?
Yeah, God, when it's definitely a romantic idea, and then you start, and as you get older, you realise what is being rich. Like, it's, rich in life or rich with wealth. It's sort of like, what's more important. And growing up, and and watching my parents struggle, working three jobs each, and still trying to run a farm and to get ahead so that they could get their dream of owning some land and having a farm. And you don't like seeing your parents struggle. So you're like, how can I make it easier? Oh, yeah, okay, we have wool. So if I can make my dad's wool really valuable, and people will pay heaps of money for it, then we'll have more money. And they won't have to work as hard. Yeah. And then and wool goes through its cycles, and it's, but it didn't really work. But we were rich in life. We had a very lucky childhood, my brother and I, growing up, and actually getting to work out on the farm, and we had horses growing up in the New England. It's, everyone's got horses, so with the horses and even though you're like, oh, do I have to really go help shearing when you're a kid? But you look back and it's beautiful experiences. Like, you wouldn't change it for the world now. Teaches
so much
you
family time, isn't it, when it comes down to that? And it's nearly like a celebration. Yeah.
And my mum was very active in helping on the farm too. So seeing my mum worked as well was like, oh, girls can do it too. Because traditionally girls don't go into farming. But, seeing mum work just as hard as dad was like, oh, okay, I can do this too.
And, like, did you have, as you were going through high school, did you have ambitions of the farming side, or, like, was that design area really kind of calling you in?
Yeah, no, definitely. The design area is definitely a creative person. And, sometimes I think, maybe if I stayed home on the farm it would be different and, took on dad, because my brother's now a builder as well, because we went through the drought, the 06 drought, 7 drought, and my brother seen that and was like, yeah, hell no, I'm not being a farmer. But so he's a builder and he's a very successful foreman and things in Newcastle. But so my dad still has the little bit of land. So sometimes I think, maybe if I stayed home and it'd be different. But no, there's always something. I've got to be creative. Even just sitting at home, I've got to be making something with my hands, or just making something or doing something to keep the creative side of my brain working all the time. I think I'd go nuts if I did anything else.
And tell me a little bit more about that, like the creative side, because I know I've got in my notes that you're actually dyslexic.
Yeah, well, yeah, gosh, so I'm severely dyslexic.
Still today?
Yeah.
Really?
It never leaves you. No, it's something you've always. So never give me any. That's why I never really got into acting until, I always loved the idea of acting, but I was always too scared because I can't read a script.
Yeah.
And then to learn the lines and all those sorts of things. So at school I never did any, like, even just getting up on stage was nearly crippling with anxiety. Like, I couldn't even speak in front of anyone. I was this quiet little shy kid that never said boo, which is weird because now people are like, oh my gosh, shut up. But so severely dyslexic. And in year 8, I remember mum and dad talking to the school that I went to at the time, and they were like, why isn't she, keeping up with all the other kids? And they basically told mum and dad that I was simple. I was just going to be a bit simple. And I was like, and they were like, well, I don't know if that's right. Like, she seems fine to us. And, as a parent, you always think there's nothing wrong with your child. But they were like, no, I don't think she's simple. So I was so lucky again that my parents just took the initiative to work really hard. So they sent me away to a boarding school. I was a day girl. Mm-hmm. And within a week of being there, they picked up that I was dyslexic in year 9. And I went back to kinder basically and had to learn to read and write again. I had a reader and writer in all my exams right through to the end of year 12. So I didn't sit normal exams like you guys did in a big hall. I'd sit in the library with my reader and writer next to me and do all my exams. And, and I got extra time because it'd take me longer to read things. But, even now, if you give me a piece of paper to read out loud, it sounds like gooldy-goog. It doesn't, like, something from here coming out here, it just doesn't come out. Or if I read something, it doesn't – I can read it to myself, but if it's more than a page, the information is just lost. It's just I don't comprehend it, or I look at a page and everything's all over the place. And sometimes if I handwrite things, you'll see like, what the fuck is she trying to say? Like, what has she written? So that was why I never really got into acting. And then I worked out that I had a photographic memory when I went to uni, and worked out that if I can remember, and I've only got to sort of read lines 3 or 4 times, and then it's in my head. So just learning differently.
Right.
Yeah.
There you go.
And they say most dyslexic people are creative because they problem solve differently. And when you hear of a lot of other dyslexic people, or like Tom Cruise is dyslexic, he's never read a script in his life. He gets them all put on audio. Keira Knightley, Richard Branson. There's so many people. He's got a foundation that he supports called Made by Dyslexia, and in the UK, and it's amazing that all these studies have done on dyslexic brains.
There you go.
So that's, I guess, that's the creative side, and I was never going to get into fashion design with my end of score, my UAI, as it used to be called. I got 49.5, and you needed a 99 to get into fashion. Never going to get in that way.
Oh, my God. That high.
Yeah, because it's
Probably
so
higher than
competitive because
doctor.
everyone wants to get in, so they've got to weed people out. So
Seems ridiculous, doesn't it, when you look back at it? Because there's no correlation between
no,
how you
not at all.
go in a belonging essay in English and how you can get into fashion.
Yeah, yeah. So I had to think of a different way of getting into it, and there was this competition, the Australian Wool Fashion Awards. So I entered it every year at school, and then once I got to year 11, I made a wedding dress and won a scholarship to go and study in Sydney.
Wow!
So that was my opening door really into the big world of fashion. Yeah.
I heard only this week. I heard the most interesting story about dyslexia and agriculture. And well, so the first part is the stat that apparently 43% of Australians are actually, what is it, like the literacy? Is it like a 11 or 12-year-old or something?
Yeah, wow. Yeah.
I'll have to chase down where that one came from, but I heard someone speaking about it. Then the second part was this story of this guy who was a farmhand, and he was a really good employee, but then the farm manager kept getting messages late at night and emails and whatnot, and the person, he was like, oh, we're communicating over WhatsApp. You can't follow simple communications. Anyway, the bloke would work till like 7:30 at night every night. And it was because he was so terrified because of his dyslexia to go home because he didn't want to be there for his kids to read them a bedtime story because he couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So he got his wife to do it. And then why the messages would come late at night was because he actually got his wife to help him understand what the messages and orders were that day and then communicate that back to his boss. It was like incredible, and it was around communication.
Yeah, and that makes sense because, most dyslexic people, they do try and hide it, and that's why they say it doesn't get picked up at school because they find different ways of – so, like even at school when we'd have to read – how there's teachers, it's horrible. They're like, okay, everyone's got to read a sentence.
Oh, and you just melt in your chair.
Yeah, and so I'd count how many people were in front of me, and then I'd get to the sentence that was mine, and I'd practice and practice and practice it. So then when it got to it, so I didn't hear anything else that anyone else was saying.
Gotcha.
Or my girlfriend that I used to sit with in class, I'd get her, she'd whisper at the sentence to me, and I'd just repeat what she'd say. And so teachers were just not picking up on it because you find different defense mechanisms. But, one of the biggest things is just the fear of people not thinking you're dumb because you can't read, because it's something so many people just can do so easily. And you're like, why can't I freaking read? And, traditionally if you couldn't read, you were labelled as someone who was dumb and illiterate. And so it's finding ways to hide it. Like I'm the same. I can't read. Like once the books get over, a sentence, a page with the kids, like my husband does all the reading with the kids. I don't, because
they're quick learners. They just got to start reading.
And they're just like, why? I don't. And it's embarrassing to think, in the next couple of years they're going to be like, why can't you read, Mum? That's just something I'm going to have to. And they could be, dyslexia is highly hereditary as well. So chances are one of them is going to be dyslexic as well.
Yeah,
that'll be interesting watching their learning process to see if they are. And I'm picking things up in my son, like little things that he does, and I'm like, oh great, you poor bastard, you're gonna be dyslexic, yay. But yeah, that doesn't surprise me that that's how he's got around it.
Yeah. Just ultimate problem solvers, really, is how it sounds.
Yeah, and that's actually a skill on your resume in Europe now. You can write down dyslexic thinking as a skill set.
There you go. Now today you mentioned like you're back down in Tattayuan. You've done the fashion side of things, did the Miss Australia part.
Stop bringing it up.
I think we have to address it.
Yeah, okay.
What spurred you on? Was it because of the fashion side of things that spurred you on to apply for it? And what actually?
No. So it was more that my husband and I had the charity Live Rural and I was just like, how the hell can we get maximum exposure for this? Like, how can I? And the greatest tool I have to advertise and promote agriculture and, health, like the lack of health resources in agriculture, is myself. I'm the biggest tool that I have to spread that message. So how can I get myself in as many places as possible to spread that message? So a friend was like, oh, you should do this this Mrs. Australia thing. You'd be hilarious in it. And I'm like, oh. So I went and did it. And it was fun. Like, you get to get dressed up and, not often do you get to wear a ball gown around and talk about a topic that you're really passionate about. And because my topic that I was passionate about was so different to everyone else's, and they were like, oh, wow, this actually is a real issue. I think they were like, oh, okay, we'll give her a crack. And, yeah. And going to America was wow. Whoa.
Really?
Like, wow, they do pageants in America. Like,
just like the TV shows.
Yeah, it really was. Like, I had to get up at 4 a.m. to get my hair and makeup done every morning. And, and it's hair like this, like huge. And I'd go back to bed and all the other girls would get the shits because they're like, how have you worked out how to go back to bed and not mess up your hair? I'm like, mate, I'm tired. I will find a way to do anything. Priority
number 2 is the hair. Number 1 is sleep.
Yeah.
Tell me more about the charity.
Yeah, so my husband and I, yes, we've both got strong mental health issues on both sides of our family. Like, my husband's lost his uncle to suicide. My mum's attempted suicide. My dad's bipolar. There's a lot of mental health stemming through both sides of our family. And then the older you get, the more you realise there's not many resources there to support people with mental health. And there was, when we started the charity in 2014, it was still a topic that wasn't really talked about that much.
Mm-hmm.
And, and even starting the charity was a lot of people were sort of very hesitant to get involved, whereas now it seems to be, becoming such a much normal conversation to have. And then not just that, it's just the healthcare of doctors, of farmers and people working in the ag sector. Like, they just don't have time to go and get a health check.
Mm.
So that was the other thing. We joined with the National Centre for Farmer Health to do farmer health checks.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd ring everyone in our little community and be like, okay, we're doing health checks on this day and you don't have a choice, you're coming. And they'd all have to come and have their health checks on that day. And they'd be like, oh, my God, we better go. So she just leaves us alone.
Yeah.
And, it was good because some of those checks led to, they had underlying health issues that they hadn't addressed and things. But, yeah, and trying to provide support and getting the conversation started around mental health and just general health, because we all know that in rural communities, the resources are not as great as they are in the city. Like, even, just now since COVID, to get in to see a psychologist, 6 months in the city, like, imagine what that's like in the country. You can't even get in, let alone a psychiatrist. And then to get in to see a GP is a 2-week wait. And by the time you get in, you're better. Well, you think you are, but there might be underlying issues. So then everyone just puts off their physical health, and then when their physical health gets so low, your mental health gets low. Like, even just most farmers have got a bad back or a bad knee, or, they just persevere and then they self-medicate with either alcohol or just opioids or something, and then that all has this flow-on effect to the mental health. And it's just, there's the lack of resources and support, and then country people aren't the squeaky wheel, are they? Like, you don't hear them protesting about the lack of resources or different things. So someone has to be the squeaky wheel to try and get it there, but it's getting the right people to hear your message is quite hard when you don't have those networks. So that was, part of the charity was just trying to get the message out there and show people, and then also provide support. So we did the mental health first aid courses with money that we raised, so that, everyone in the community can go and do these courses for free. So that if they see someone struggling, they've got the right toolbox to help or to provide support or point them in the right direction. And then, the farmer health checks, just to get them to get a health check. Some of them hadn't been to the doctor in like 10 years, and you think, oh my God, you're bright red, you have cholesterol issues, like you need to go and see a doctor. Or, and just the alcoholism in the country, there's the pressure to drink. It's not cool to drink, and then that become, it starts off at 18 or even, younger, 16, and the confidence that alcohol gives you to go out, and then it becomes you can't go out and socialise unless you're drunk. And then that flows on until you're 60, 70, and, it takes more to get to that point where you're comfortable to go out and socialise when you're drunk. So they're drinking every day, and And, that's not good for your health. And then they get cholesterol or overweight, and then that affects their mental health. And so it's just, all those sorts of things. It's just trying
to spiral.
Yeah.
And I love the way that you guys have gone about it, though, because you've, as you mentioned, you got the mental health first aid course as the health checkups, but then also, so I had no idea that you were the ones behind Mellow in the Yellow.
Yeah.
The big old lunch.
Yeah. No, so that was one of those crazy ideas. I come home one day because I was working in Hamilton, so I've got a long time sitting in a car to come up with a lot of crazy ideas. And I'm a bit weird. I sit in complete silence in the car.
Do you?
Yeah.
All the time?
Most of the time, yeah. If sometimes I'm like, I might listen to a little bit of music. Most of the time I'm in complete silence. I love just silence because I can just think and my brain can just go, and do weird. So I just like that time to think. So I'd come up with the craziest ideas and my husband would be like, okay, whatever. But yeah, coming home with, I was like, we're going to do an event. And I did get the idea from the Bali banquet, like the Bali banquet, but here. And I'm like, and it's going to be Mellow in the Yellow. And we're going to have a lawn in the middle of the canola crop. And he's like, ooh. And so the first year starting anything, it's trying to get a committee on board and other people that are willing to take the risk with you, because it is a risk. When you first start any event, a lot of people try and get, funding and grants and all that sort of stuff. But you can't, for me, running anything, you can't rely on a government or a funding to be sustainable. It has to be sustainable on its own.
Yep. 100%.
So we put a lot of our own money into starting the event because, you're waiting for months, 6 months, 12 months to get any grants, or then even when you get that, it's, this much and you've still got to find the other stuff. So we just, for the first 3 years, it didn't make a profit, but you've just got to keep persevering. And then, now it's been going 10 years. This is its 10th year. And it's amazing now. We sell out in the first hour and we have 300 people. And, when we first started, I couldn't even get people to join the committee. Then as it goes, people get on and they see that it's fun to run and the impact that it was having. And when we did first start it, admittedly, mental health was still quite a taboo topic. So they're like, oh, you're going to have a guest speaker come and talk about mental health and suicide. That's a bit morbid. But it's amazing. It gave people the opportunity to share their story, which I, wasn't expecting that to be the case. But once one person stands up and shares their story, and, everyone's had a few drinks and they're a bit more comfortable, they start sharing their stories and it circulates. It was quite incredible. So now everyone's just loves to come and have a yarn for the day. And, this year we've got Shana Warren coming from Sober in the Country as a guest speaker, and she's amazing. She's been a great help, just with just mentoring. I just ring her sometimes. I'm like, what am I doing with my life? Oh, my God. And she's so good.
She's incredible.
Yeah, she's a champion of other people as well. She's always there to help and lift everyone up, it's amazing to find someone that can do that. So that was Mellow in the Yellow, and it's amazing now. I'm not on the committee anymore. I'm still a director of the charity, but I'm not on the committee. But I had a great mentor, Deb Bain, say to me once, because I was starting to get a bit burnt out, and you're like, and she just said, when you can leave something you've created and know that it's still going to continue, what you've created is a success. And I was like, yeah, that's really true. So if I can walk away from it and know that it's going to continue and its message and its legacy is going to continue, then what I've created is successful, and I can leave it to the next people to do it. So it's really nice to go to the event now and not
just relax.
Yeah, I can't though. I don't. I'm really bad. I'm not the best at socializing. So I either have the camera and I'm taking photos, or I'm helping out in the bar or cleaning up. I'm not. So I need a job.
Not just standing around.
No, I need a job to do. So that's probably my social anxiety. I'm not the greatest at it. So I always like to have a job, and then that's my way of interacting with people. If I'm taking food around, or
gotcha.
Yeah, and because I don't drink either, so I'm not. I don't. That's my way of sort of edging into conversations, like, hey, you want some food? And then
makes sense. It's fun in the little...
Yeah, used to drink a lot in excess, but now I'm like, not the best version of myself when I drink, so...
Oh, that's cool. It's good that you realise that.
Yeah.
So tell me about your latest project, which is the one which you've just been spending a bit of time in Melbourne.
Oh, my gosh, it's consumed my life. How
long... Well, firstly, let's chat about what is it and why have you decided to do it?
Yeah, well, I guess during COVID, when everyone's locked up, you start to think, oh, well, I can't get out and spread the message physically with myself at the moment because we can't go anywhere. But what was everyone doing? We're all sitting at home watching Netflix movies, binge watching stuff. And you're more likely to watch a movie than a documentary or a TV series because you can lose yourself in the story. So that's when I was like, oh, if we can make a movie that's got the message in it somehow, but still be entertaining and people can relate to the characters and put, find bits of themselves in the characters, then maybe we could really hit this message home with millions of people if we can get them to watch it. So then I was like, right, now I need to find a story. And then because of all the work that we'd been doing in that sector as well, I've got lots of stories and interviews and things that I'd done with people. So I had a really big knowledge bank of the issue and the story and then living the life as well. So, yeah, the script took me 2 years to write and just, because it has to be authentic. It had to be real. Like we watch a lot of movies in Australia that are about country Australia and we all sit and watch it and go, that's not what we're like. Like we don't dress like that. We don't talk like that. We're not all bogans. We're not, we're not all 80 years old. So the story had to be so authentic and so real and like even just down to the language had to be the way that we speak and the clothes and the way we work and the relationships even just with the animals that are in the film and the relationships between friends and, because country people have, it's a way of life. We are a culture. So the culture behind it had to be spot on. So, yeah, just fact-checking everything.
And you need that sense of, I guess, pride. You want the people who you're trying to celebrate to actually become the real champions of it and just lift it up.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And, as soon as they see anything that's not authentic, they'll disconnect from the story and then the people we're wanting this message to hit won't be connected to the story. So in the filming process, that was his job. He was like, this new word, he's like, continuity. It's all about continuity. And he'd be like, no, Leila, continuity. It has to look real. And he'd be like, the sheep have to look crutched. And he'd like get in there and like crutch a heap of sheep so that when we did the shot of them outside in the catching pens or whatever, they looked crutched. I'm like, wow. So he went above and beyond to make it look so authentic and real.
That it just was.
Yeah, that it just was. Yeah, well, even the shearing scenes, we actually were shearing that week, so we had to do it that week. The ones that he's most disappointed with is because it wasn't harvest and it wasn't hay season, he went and rolled out bales of hay in the paddock so that it looked like rows of hay and then we rebaled the hay. I'm like, oh,
you better not tell too many people that.
No.
The authenticity, gee.
Yeah. Yeah, so some things were hard to get, and it's not a comedy by any means, the story. It's a hard-hitting message. It's really raw, it's true. Like the characters are so truthful in the way that they come across on screen and it's heartbreaking. It's a heartbreaking story, but there is hope in there, and the underlying message is that, this is the outcome of what happens in a community when there are lack of resources. This is the worst thing that can happen, and it's happening every 10 days in Australia. And we need people and the governments and, people with money to come and help and make sure that country communities aren't missing out when it comes to their healthcare. Because if it keeps going this way, these things are going to keep happening and it's getting worse. And then the next thing is as well, like who's going to be our future generations on the farm? If my kids see my husband struggling all the time and it's a slog and, you never get a day off, as if they're going to want to be farmers. So we need to be showing them that it's just not a high, and it is beautiful. Like most of the time, we love farming, but, even just now the El Nino's come back. And all the currents have changed and they're saying we're going into another dry and everyone's just gone into PTSD mode in, New South Wales and Queensland from the last drought, and they're selling stock left, right and centre because they're scared we're going to go into another drought. And that was I did a trip in 2018 with the kids, a nanny, a girl from Malta in the horse truck, and we just stopped in and, had a chat with farmers as we went around and just, stopped in and have a cup of tea. And it was the most heartbreak. I was going to do a like little documentary on it, but once I started interviewing people as I went it and talking to them, I was like, I feel like I'd be exploiting them if I shared their stories because they were so heartbreaking, and they were just, oh my God, it was even just like I broke down on the side of the road and the hydraulics on my truck wouldn't work to get the thing back up, and I couldn't find anyone to come and help me, and a header driver that someone just randomly goes, oh, there's this bloke there, like it was near Coonabarabran, and they're like, he'll come and help you, give him a call, see if he can come help. And he came out and he was a header driver, and he just bought 2 years before, a brand new header for $500,000 or, whatever they're worth, and had never been out of the shed, and he's still making repayments on that vehicle, but didn't know whether to sell it or not because he didn't know, do I keep it because we might get rain and get a harvest next year or whatever. But it's sort of like it was that huge flow-on effect of the drought that was having not just on the farmers but the people they employ. And then you work out that a farmer over 12 months probably has 28 different employees of what, from their stock agent right through to, their agronomist, financial manager, shearers, all those sorts of things, 28 people. And then that's 28 families that they're helping with an income, all the farmers in that community. And then that's the money that also then goes into the community to fund the dress shops and the builders and the takeaway shops and sort of thing. So if it's not going well here, that money's and that employability is not trickling through the community, and then the whole community feels the effect of it. And then it affects the mental health, and then it's just this big snowball.
What's amazing, you only have to look at, I know, towns like Finley, like in the last drought and people leaving. Well, and it's the story across every rural community that's an agricultural community. It's a family leaves because of, I guess, the conditions, and that other part of that family might be the school teacher or the nurse or whatever it is. And so it's like all the support services that in these agriculture communities that start to dissipate and disappear.
Yeah.
And it has huge flow-on impacts, and often those people aren't then coming back once they've gone.
Yeah, so Deakin University's just started, just put money into a program where they're funding rural medical students to go and study medicine so that then they can go back to their communities and be GPs or, healthcare professionals. So, it's a great initiative as well, but then it's also how do we get those doctors to go back? And, once you get a taste of the city, you're going to want to go back. And, it's trying to work out how we keep our country communities thriving and fun places to be. And it's not just, there's so many facets in it, isn't there, to try and work out how we can just keep these communities thriving because ultimately, isn't it, it's food. We need food to survive, and without it, it's going to cripple society. So we need to keep it going, and I think health is a massive part of that. If we can keep our communities healthy, then, hopefully we can keep, and, bringing people in to want to be in them and work in those health sectors and keep them in the health sector in rural communities. Because I've got a friend who owns medical centres, and her biggest job is keeping GPs in her practices. They do their country placement, and then they're gone straight away. Boop, see you later, back to the city. And it's a beautiful life. I don't know how people live in the city. I did uni. I went to uni in Sydney and I loved it. And now I go back and I'm like, oh my God, how did I ever live here?
Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah. So that's the whole thing with the So then, we can get it into cinemas, and on streaming services, and hopefully that will have a big impact and get the message out there and try and get more funding and more resources coming back into rural communities, because I'll see this is the effect that lack of resources is going to have, and it does have.
And so is this the first part in a bigger dream of rolling these out more regularly, or what? Are you hoping it's a conversation starter, or what are you looking for?
Yeah, I'd love it to be a conversation starter, and then, if the movie could make money, which, movies don't really ever make money, but if it could make money, like putting that money back into these communities and resources, and, it'd be great to be able to fund a psychologist in, rural hubs that, specialises for rural mental health, or, sponsor GPs and, accommodation's one of the biggest things to keep GPs in small towns, even just being able to provide accommodation to keep GPs in towns. I could love it. I'm just putting money back into the area that needs it, because you need money to do anything, which is ridiculous.
You do.
Because we all need it to
the
cog
survive. That keeps everything going, isn't it?
Yeah, and then it'd be great to, be telling more rural stories, and championing our real champions in this country. Like a lot of our TV shows and movies at the moment, we're kind of glorifying criminals, Nelly. We're seeing so many films about criminals and murderers and things. It's like they're not the people we should be putting in the history books and remembering and telling our kids their stories. We should be sharing stories of actual pioneers, of champions in our country that are doing great things. And there's a lot of those people that live in the country.
Absolutely. Now, I've got one question which I ask everyone that come on, and I'll be interested in your response. So if you had the chance to go and chat to your 10 students about a career in agriculture, why should they consider it today, and what would be your message to them?
Yeah, well, funny that I am a school teacher. Teach wood, metal and textiles and food, and art sometimes. And I'd love a really amazing ag school out in the Western Districts, like for kids. In New South Wales, there's a lot of ag schools, and there's not really that many here in Victoria. But yeah, there's so many jobs in the ag sector. Like, I don't know how many years ago when they did the study, I think it was just before COVID. So for every kid that goes and studies ag, they've got 5 jobs to choose from. Whereas in other degrees, you've got 5 people going for the one job. So there are just so many jobs, and it's so versatile. And, it can be creative, it can be scientific, it can be physical work. If you like working outside, there's just so many facets. And you're contributing to society in a way that no other industry really does. You're the survival of human beings, really. So why wouldn't you want to be a part of that? Yeah.
Absolutely.
And there's so much new stuff happening, with science and the way we're trying to, create a better environment, and it all starts with us. And the one thing that shits me is people in the city or people that live in, suburban areas, they go, farmers, their cows are farting and making too much, carbon and blah, blah, blah. It's like, but have you ever thought that in the city there's not one piece of natural environment at all? Not one little thing. Everything that is natural to that environment is completely destroyed and been made by man. Whereas you come out to the country and you might see a fence or a wind turbine and think, oh, that's destroying the environment, but you can just see it. You can pick it out of the natural environment, whereas in the city it's a Taylor Sheridan quote, like everything's, the destruction's been disguised because everything's destroyed. So
it's a good quote, that one.
Yeah, he's got some good ones.
He's a wise man.
Yeah. So it's sort of, why wouldn't you want to be a part of an industry that's so forward thinking and in the future of the world, really? Mm.
For sure. I agree completely. Well, thank you so much for coming and having a chat.
No, it's good. I'm good at talking. So I love a chat, especially when you get on your passion project and you're like, I want to tell everyone about it. So no, thanks for.
Oh, we can't wait to keep our eyes peeled, and I'm sure we'll find out a whole lot more about it in the coming months.
Yep, that sounds good. Thank you.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. I certainly did. I've been battling a bit of a cold, so it did challenge me a little bit. But Leila's background is bloody interesting, and I can't wait to see this movie that they've made. And I'm really excited to see that it is all about getting the messages around mental health out front and centre and making it relatable. And I think what she talked to, rather than doing a documentary, they've done it in this style because it actually allows people to see themselves in the characters. So keep your eyes peeled. We'll make sure we share more about it when it's out there. Look after yourselves, stay safe, stay sane. We'll chat to you soon. See ya.